Good evening and welcome to the March 7th, 2023 regular session of Findlay City Council. We will start this evening's meeting with the roll call, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Ballman?
Here.
Ms. Frischi?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
And Mr. Wopser.
Present.
Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will accept a motion to accept the last minutes of Findlay City Council. Mr. Slough.
I would move to approve the minutes as circulated.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the last City Council minutes say aye. Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. We do have an add-on or replacement this evening. Mr. Russell?
Yes, we have an add-on letter from Laura McGregor Comic Esquire for representing the Laura M. Comic Law for LLC law firm concerning the waiving of the second and third readings of resolution numbers 008-2023 and 009-2023 concerning the County Road 220 annexation petitions, and or add that to the petition section, and also replacement for ordinance 2023-024 as amended, the body-worn camera grant legislation, just adding appropriations of funds section to that legislation, and that is a motion to add them on and replace them in the agenda.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the add-ons as say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are added to tonight's agenda. Mayor Murin, we do have a proclamation this evening.
Good evening. Whereas the Hancock County Board of Developmental Disabilities was established in October of 1952, and whereas the mission and purpose of Ohio's County Boards of Developmental Disabilities remain as strong as ever, with county boards continuing to provide vital supports and resources to Ohioans with developmental disabilities and their families. And whereas the more than 700 people with developmental disabilities served by the Hancock County Board of Developmental Disabilities, their families, friends, and neighbors and coworkers encourage everyone to focus on the abilities of all people. And whereas the most effective way to increase this awareness is through everyone's active participation in community activities and the openness to learn and acknowledge each individual's contribution. And whereas policies must be developed, attitudes shaped, and opportunities offered that allow people with developmental disabilities to live as independently and productively as possible in our community. And whereas we encourage all citizens to foster and support such opportunities that include full access to education, housing, employment, and recreational activities. Now, therefore, I, Christina Emmerd, Mayor of the City of Findlay, Ohio, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in Findlay and offer full support to efforts that assist people with disabilities to make choices that enable them to live successful lives and realize their potential. I further encourage all citizens to join into this celebration by spreading awareness of the many contributions offered by people with developmental disabilities in our community. I'm always excited to be able to present this annually to, again, recognize the folks in our community that give back and engage in our community. And two things, I know there is the celebrity basketball game coming up here soon, though I will not be playing basketball because that is not my sport. I will be there to cheer them on. I would encourage you also to participate and come out and cheer them on. It is free at Findlay High School. I would also note that there was a great article today in the newspaper about the Special Olympics team here in Hancock County winning the state championship. So congratulations to all of the individuals that participate in Special Olympics, that engage in our community, and for our employers and citizens that make sure that they are valued as citizens here in Findlay. I'm not sure if we have folks from Blanchard Valley that are here to present. If you guys would come forward, we'll present this real quick.
Are there any comments from council? Hearing none, thank you, and good luck at your basketball game. We have no recognition or retirement resolutions. We do have a petition.
Petition for annexation for County Road 220. It is 2 parcels, and we did receive a letter from Attorney Laura Comic requesting that we waive the 2 readings for the 2 resolutions tonight.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Yeah, point of order, can we really waive the readings, or does this require a public hearing prior to the 3rd reading? And
You are correct. Oh, Ms. Mayor.
No, so as the letter outlines from Laura Comic, she is a specialist in this, and also the individual submitting it for the organization. In discussions with Law Director Rasmussen, it was confirmed that because this is not accepting the annexation, but just informing the commissioners of what services we would provide upon annexation, it does not require a public hearing and would be able to have it waived. So obviously we would not be able to do that for the formal annexation, but this is simply the resolution stating the services we would provide.
Do you concur? I do. Mr. Rasmussen concurs. Ms. Frischie?
Can you give a little bit more detail on this 138 acres of what's there? This is not part of the truck stop, or is it?
Ms. Mayor?
Yeah, so there's 2 separate parcels that are being requested. So the front one is the property right at the northeast corner of 99 and 75, where Racetrack is interested in going. The property beyond that, at this point owned by the same property owner, has no development plans at this point. They have not spoke with us about City Planning Commission, but they are asking for that to be annexed at the same time.
So we don't know what services we'd be providing, or, I mean, if we're just bringing in farmland, or I know that the economic development sounds like they have those parcels under contract to market them. I just assumed that there was a little more to that with having the request to waive readings.
So the reason that it was requested to be waived is because from the time period that it is submitted to the commissioners, they request by law that the resolution for what services that would be provided be in the commissioner's hands 20 days before the hearing would occur. And they have the hearing scheduled for April 25th. Therefore, that if we pass it, give it all 3 readings, and we can give it a reading tonight, all they would ask is that we pass it before its 3rd reading, because that would be April 4th, and then that would only give us, a couple hours that next day following the council meeting to give them a notarized copy and get it over the commissioner's office. So we can let it go. It was inadvertently left off the agenda, so it can go another reading, but we would just ask that at that point in time we be prepared to pass it, so that they have it in a timely fashion.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, petition to be filed. Oral communications, we have 4 this evening, I think. Let me check. We're going to start this evening with Andrew Corso from American Electric Power. He's going to give us an update on their project.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me? Okay, we're good. Nice to see everybody here again today to give another update on the Yeah, well, I remember last time you helped me out on that, Mayor. Thank you for that. I didn't get any more time from the president, but thank you for that. Again, my name is Drew Corso. I'm the project manager for the Findlay to 5th Underground project for American Electric Power. It's very nice to see everybody again here today. Some new seating arrangements, I think, from the last time, which is nice. Wanted to give an update. Very pleased to announce that we have actually completed the underground portion, and the underground line is actually carrying power. It's what we call in service. So it's actually providing service to the Findlay area and Marathon in particular, the campus. The only thing that we don't have completed is what we call the mill and fill. If you see down the street where we trenched, there's the concrete, topping. And we've been working with Jeremy here in the city engineer's office. We wanted to delay the mill and fill. The city has some work that's being done in the same area that we did work in, And we're responsible to do the mill and fill, so it actually saves the city money by waiting to actually do the mill and fill, since the city's doing work in that same area. So we've been working with Jeremy and his office quite closely, and I couldn't tell you the dollar value, but it's a good chunk of change that the city's not going to have to outlay for repairs and then the mill and fill for the work that you're doing. So that's going to happen in spring. Exact dates are still a little bit up in the air. We're thinking sometime maybe in the May area, depending on weather and if the work gets done. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, yep. They've been working with us on that because, like you said, we had that storm project and stuff, so that way we're not paving then tearing it back up. So once we get the coordination down with our storm project and our resurfacing crews, then we will work that out with them, but probably the May time zoners. So.
Yep. So that's really the long and short of it. It's a lot of big packet that says a lot of complete stuff here. There is one other thing that I want to introduce, and I hope I can get under the 4 minutes. We have continued, it's the second phase of the Findlay to 5th Underground project. It happens to be an overhead component that starts at Marathon Substation where we ended with the underground, and it goes west down the alley, and then it wiggles its way out of Findlay city proper. We have the same robust right-of-way and communication method as we did for the underground project, so any citizen of Findlay or somebody that's on that route can view, register their concerns, and we can address them in the same manner that we did successfully for the underground project. We're hoping to get that finished by July of this year, thereabouts. It's a lot of very tedious work, so we have to have the guys do it safely, so that's actually in here as well. So that's really the update that I have for council. If there's any questions.
Questions for Andrew? It's nice to see you keep, Mr. Hellman.
Yes, sir.
If I may, you said there was going to be overhead work on this next phase, is that correct?
Yes,
Going
sir.
from Marathon West, I think you said?
Yes, sir.
Are those going to be new poles?
Yes, sir.
And will those be those Herculean poles like we've seen dot the community?
Yes.
They will be.
Yes, sir. They'll be the tall steel galvanized poles. I think they're in the neighborhoods of 70 to 80 feet tall. Yes, sir.
And what, 6 feet in diameter or whatever?
Well,
they are?
the large
Not quite 6
diameter
feet.
ones, yeah, the large diameter ones that you see are actually what we call custom poles. They're foundation poles. We go from what's called a dead end to dead end, custom pole to custom pole, and then we string the wire between them. Between those custom poles, we just do what we call direct embeds. Those are skinnier poles. So there are some of the larger diameter 6-foot foundations, and then some smaller, skinnier ones between them. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what is the expected life of one of the wooden poles? And those are aesthetically more pleasing to me than the metal poles. And I noticed that some are up along out at the Findlay Country Club.
Yes, sir. That was a project we finished, I think, the end of 2021. Yes, sir.
So what is the, I guess, what is the reasoning behind the metal other than it lasts longer, I assume?
Yeah, some of the infrastructure we're replacing is anywhere from the 1920s all the way up to recent, if there's been repairs. I can't tell you the exact date. I don't remember exactly of the stuff we're replacing, the wood poles in town, but it's aging infrastructure. Since that time frame, the code, the clearance code, has increased greatly, and that's one of the many reasons why you see those much taller poles. The taller the pole, the more stress on it, and that's one of the reasons why we go with metal for stability and strength and longevity as well. Yeah, so it's for a variety of reasons: stability, durability, and then also to get that increased height. And yeah, that's not the first conversation I've had about the aesthetics, I guess, would say, about the poles, but they're definitely necessary for our standards. No problem.
Any other, Mr. Hellman?
Just one last thing. Did it ever occur from an aesthetic standpoint and the community's benefit to put these things underground?
Well, we also are regulated business, and we also have regulations and regulators to abide by. We have to make sure that we're fiscally responsible to the ratepayers, and we actually, get audited from time to time. So sometimes it's correct that we can go underground. Sometimes it's not feasible for us to do so. That's not something that I determine. It actually happens before I actually get the project. So if you want more information, I can definitely get you in contact with the right folks to give you a more detailed description of how that actually comes about.
But I take it it's driven by costs.
Not only
Money?
cost. I mean,
No.
One of the reasons we went through and did underground on the project here was because we couldn't get clearance through some of the alleys to get to the other substation without buying and knocking down dozens of houses, that's not palatable for anybody. So there's a lot of factors that go into
Mayor
using
Muir.
those.
I would just add, I know we have had conversations more so with the distribution side. So Andrew's with transmission, which is obviously the larger, less pretty, if any of them are. But I would just note that we have had some discussions with distribution about how we can try to get more underground, how we can make sure that we're looking for opportunities to do that in the future. So that is a conversation we're having. Transmission side is much more complicated because of the voltage of the wires and all the science behind that. There's a little more opportunity on the distribution side. So we are having some preliminary conversations and figuring out how we may be able to make that happen, because I know it's not pretty, and then there's also reliability, but it also doesn't work in all areas.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you for that. You're correct. That's the other reason why the poles are so tall. It's a higher voltage. We've designed the poles that going down the back of the alley. There's 69 kV. Distribution is more in the realm of 13 kV. So the bigger the voltage, the bigger the clearance that we have. And that's another one of the many reasons that the poles are the way they are.
Ms. Frishy?
So what are we looking at putting on these poles that we need this higher voltage? And did we have to approve this within our city to allow for it, or
No.
I know that you have to give people compensation for putting it on their property, but what are we putting on these poles that we need that much higher voltage?
Well, we're replacing an existing line that's already there, that's aging. So we're actually replacing what was already there, but with newer standards. So we're replacing the same 34.5 line to 69 kV standards. So they're taller poles. We're really just rebuilding an existing line that's already there. And we're operating under the franchise agreement that we have, and I don't remember, it's signed maybe back in the 50s or 60s. So that gives AEP the right to do the project in any right-of-way space for the city of Findlay. Now, when we deviate off right-of-way, then that's when we have to go to the private property owners and compensate them for the right-of-way, or if we have to buy something for clearance reasons, sometimes we have to buy a property and knock it down. And that's what we tried to avoid with the underground portion of it. Yeah. Mayor, thank you very much. That was a very good point. I should have brought that to Mr. Hellman's attention when he asked.
Any other questions for Mr. Corso? Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Thank you.
Our second oral communication tonight is Dwight Henley. Dwight would like to speak to the Forest Lake ditch petition. And you have 4 minutes.
4 minutes, sir. I live out in Lakeview. We get taxed pretty good. Now the county is coming in and saying they would like to tax us more to fix the drainage issues in the township, which is the Forest Lake subdivision. I had asked repeatedly, how can the county come in to the city to tax us in the municipal corporation? Of course, the county makes the argument, well, you're within the confines of the county, within the physical boundaries. The petition that was filed by the Forest Lake subdivision was filed under 6131. That is the single county ditch law. You can look at that. Ditches, drainage, sewerage, anything that deals with drainage, though, for a municipal corporation is within the powers of the city. Not only under Chapter 7 of municipal, which is the Ohio Revised chapter under municipalities. If you also look at 6117.04 that deals with drainage within a municipal corporation, the county has to come to the city for any work, surveys, assessments, anything like that, that is going to affect the drainage on that. They're affecting the drainage. If you also look at special assessments, I'm trying to do more legal research on that. They're assessing us for work in the county. And if I remember, in, I believe it was Putnam County, there was an argument about the community, one of the communities there in the county, the city said, we can't tax our people for improvements in the county. If you also look at the laws that deal with the county engineer, who has crossed that boundary line of the municipal corporation, which would be County Road 237, or Township Road 237, it clearly articulates in Chapter 3, which would be 315, under the engineer's duties, he does not have the authority on anything that deals with drainage inside the municipal corporation without the municipal corporation's approval. It specifically says, Chapter 6117. I've had to fight this on my own. I've sent multiple emails to a few of you and to the mayor, and I've heard nary a word to discuss this with the county, or even file a legal brief, as I've had to take this to court on my own. I'm having to bear the burden for everybody on Brookfield Drive, part of Lakeview Parkway, and a few of those other areas, the roads that are up there, I think that's Brook Clear and stuff, that abut 237 where they're attempting to tax us. I don't understand why I'm the one that has to take the burden. This affects you as you've surrendered without even firing a shot to the county to give them authority that they don't have because there was no legislative approval. In 6131, 6117 both say, anytime you cross that municipal line, you are required to have legislative approval of this body. And that's never been done by the county. They've never come over and asked. They've never established a watershed map without the approval of this body. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions or comments? Mr. Niemeyer?
You're talking about Marion Township?
Yes, sir. Marion Township, the municipal county line is there at 237, and basically this side of 237 is the city of Findlay for Lakeview. It goes up north, but there's, I can't remember the little township road just north of us, that's in the township. But that entire Lakeview subdivision is within the city. Marion
Mayor.
Township starts at 237 and heads east.
Mayor Muir?
Mr. Hawley, I know we had exchanged emails previously. You had concerns with some information on the auditor's website as well as on taxation. I'm happy to follow up with you to try to work through the specific language you're referencing. However, I am very confident that the county engineer is following the appropriate state process for that. But I think what would be more productive is if we can reference the specific language you're trying to call out and speak with the county prosecutor. He's going to be able to give you a more direct legal opinion. But based off of our previous conversation.
He's actually opposing counsel now in the lawsuits. But look at 315.08, duties of the county engineer. Look at Ohio Revised Code 6117.04.
If you could send me the email just so I make sure I'm referencing the specific things, we're happy to take a look at it. But I know they follow a specific process for ditch maintenance and assessments that they've used multiple times across the county.
Yeah, 6131 is single county ditch. That has nothing to do with the municipality. 6117 is the city ditch law.
Yeah, so we can reference that offline.
Ms. Frishy?
What, we're talking ditches, and when I hear ditches, if you benefit from the drainage of a ditch, we usually there is an assessment. So I don't know where you're at other than Lakeview and Forest Lake. I know where that's at, but what's this ditch? Explain to me this ditch, because I don't understand where you're.
Okay, so behind, if you go through Lakeview, by the Lakeview Club, there's that bridge, that's the ditch. But they're not actually doing any work on the ditch in the city. All the work that's being done, if you go to the Forest Lakes ditch petition on the county website, all the work to be done will be in the township. They are not doing anything within the city, but they are going to tax us to fix all the problems of drainage from that construction. We're not benefiting at all, but we're going to get taxed $600 for it.
So you're not benefiting because
No.
the ditch doesn't benefit your property?
No, the ditch, actually it'll make it worse because they're going to put 24-inch tile, which means that it's going to flood more of the ditch. So it's going to cause a backup on our area of the ditch. And the 2 retention ponds, they're at Lakeview Parkway and Township Road 237. Those are actually going to get, because there's going to be a backflow of water, because you're going to end up having more water flow into the ditch that's on the township side, those are going to get overfilled. So you're adding to the ditch, the drainage issues already that they created when they built that subdivision. So you have to understand that when you read the ditch petition law, it doesn't deal just with the ditch. It also deals with underground drainage, drainage tile, drainage pipes, anything that deals with the drainage in there. It's not just that drainage ditch that was done. Yeah,
Any other questions for Mr. Henley? Hearing none, thank you.
thank you.
Our third speaker tonight is Matthew Musgrave. Matthew, would like to speak to the Riverside Park Dam and the ARPA.
I guess this mic is working. Yeah. Thank you. Well, I'm a citizen taxpayer from Hancock County, but I don't live in Findlay. I live in Arlington. And when I saw in the paper that you folks were going to accept comments on the American Rescue Plan Act, I decided I would come in and make some comments because I met with Mayor Murin back in November regarding those very same funds being used on the Riverside Park Dam project. And I discussed with her some reasons for my opposition to the use of those funds. And the mayor, being a responsible public official, of course, is trying to get money for her city wherever it is, and it's certainly there, the American Rescue Plan Act. But that act wasn't really intended to pay for what people are now using it for. It started out being money, federal money, to help people who lost their jobs during the pandemic. It was essentially originally proposed as a reemployment program, if you will, and it morphed and morphed and got larger and larger. And now they're, in fact, trying to rescue cities and communities and counties and the whole nation. But they're using it with the idea that's kind of surreal and unreal. They're not really using money they have. They're mortgaging my grandniece's generation and a couple generations after that for money that they'll be responsible to pay as taxpayers if they have any money at that point. And rather than using local tax dollars that the city would receive here in Findlay, Ohio, and then paying for the projects they have with those tax dollars, they're creating money out of the thin air and going to pay for them. And these future taxpayers, 3 and 4 generations away, are going to pay the bill. And it's not just Findlay taxpayers. You have taxpayers from all over America now trying to get those monies for their city. So while Findlay is getting those monies for Findlay, Ohio, folks in folks in North Carolina and in Salt Lake City and Omaha, Nebraska are doing the same things, for their cities. So they're taking tax money from all over America that hasn't been placed on deposit yet. I mean, that money isn't in the Treasury. It was just printed up, and it's really an IOU in the Treasury. So people all over the country have a stake in what's going on all over the country. My tax dollars and your tax dollars are going to all these other states, and those states' tax dollars are coming here. But when those tax dollars are used in these projects, they're not going to have any say about what happens to their tax dollars here in Findlay, Ohio. And I'm not going to have any say about what happens in Omaha, Nebraska. And another thing that's happening is when the city gets these tax dollars, they're handed off to a nonprofit agency that doesn't have to respond to the public records law, so local citizens have no real opportunity to access what they're doing and how they're doing it. And in fact, the city and the county are giving up a lot of that access as well, because in the Riverside Dam project, the nonprofit agency.
Mr. Musgrave, your 4 minutes is up. I'll give you a few seconds to wrap up.
Well, fine, thank you. I've got a memo here to the mayor, and as Mr. Harrington knows, there's a copy here for him, and then I have several other copies for council members if they would like to read them. And this is the culmination of project, as I said, I started last November when I met with the mayor.
Are there any questions for Mr. Musgrave? Mr. Russell?
Not for Mr. Musgrave, really for Jim. Jim, can you speak to the guidelines that we have for ARPA spending funds and how your office ensures that the spending of our ARPA funds are according to those guidelines?
I can assure this council and the general public that we are following those guidelines to the letter. And I appreciate and empathize with the concern as a tax-paying citizen myself that the federal government wrote into those rules. It's not use it or lose it. It's if you don't use it, we're going to redistribute it to somebody else who will. So they've put the entire American public in a situation where those funds, whether we can afford to spend them or not, are going to get spent. So thank you for your comments.
Well, Mr. Stashak, I appreciate that, but I've also got a section in my memo about the lack of moral courage that our government's been lacking in prioritizing those funds and what they've done. And I'm not at all confident that the monitoring process is intact as it should be. And I think it's one of the worst bills I've ever seen passed financially.
Mr. Stashak?
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I will assure you that the city of Findlay is making sure every penny, not just every dollar, but every penny is spent per the rules we're supposed to follow. So thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Musgrave? Hearing none, thank you. The next comment is from Michael Tharp. I assume I'm pronouncing that right. And he would like to speak about the YMCA properties.
Correct. Good evening, council. I realize it's a done deal that my neighborhood is being halved for a project that has no real funding as yet. But I do take exception to referring to the family homes that were slated for destruction as being somehow subpar or blighted. There are poor quality homes down towards the railroad tracks. But across from my house, there were houses that have had families in them for years that were well kept, and with rentals the way they are in Findlay, they're better than most places that are renting, or would have been. I understand now that they are slated and to be gone. So my question is, what happens now? Let's say someone comes in and they're all taken away, and there's a big grassy spot there, which I assume if you don't have money to build, that's what it'll end up being. But as my front porch now looks out upon this scene, I'm wondering, are there going to be trees? Is it going to be landscaped? Will it actually benefit my neighborhood when people drive down? Or will my property values be impacted by a project that has no determination at this point that it'll take place? And then the other question is, let's say it does take place and there's a sea of blacktop. Where does all this water go? Running off of the blacktop into the street right in front of me. We are just outside a area of flood. We have had water come up East Hardin Street, inundating Grand. And as you know, probably up in Sandusky Street, but we've been fortunate, mostly. But now we're introducing a whole parking lot of water to come rushing down into the street. When will the YMCA produce a plan that citizens like myself who live in this area that's being sliced in half, when will they produce something that allows us to see what this plan is and what their ideas of remediation is? And is the projected new building actually designed well? I've heard that it's going to be shoved back towards the railroad area there and parking lot go forward towards Marathon. I don't know if that's true or not. There's been no plan revealed that I know of. But I can't imagine the public safety problems of having an entrance on Grand Avenue for children going to the YMCA, why it would not be maybe accessed more centrally, even off of East Hardin Street, even off of East Hardin Street or Lincoln. Something that ties maybe the area together rather than splits it apart. Thank you. That's about it.
All right, are there any questions? Mayor Murin would like to comment.
I would just state that I think it would be wise for you to reach out to the YMCA. This, is not property that the city owns. They will have to comply with City Planning Commission. They would have to work through that process, but I think they would be happy to go over what plans they do have in place at this point to discuss that. But City Council doesn't control that at this point in time. We were working through a process that was open to the community at large, and they worked through the appropriate process. And that's kind of our purview at this point in time. So if you don't have a contact, feel free to reach out. I know the CEO is Stephanie Parsons, and I think that they'd be happy to meet with you to provide a little more information.
When does the city become involved in a project this size?
Ms. Mayor?
Each project's a little bit different of when somebody wants to reach out based off of the specific project needs. In this case, because it's an infill development project and they're not going to need to be annexed or changing of zoning or anything like that, I would expect that would be when they would submit it to Planning Commission, just as any other project, to get access changes, permitting, all of those types of items.
Will the houses have to be permitted to be taken down?
No, we don't have restrictions around that, outside of the fact that if they choose to accept the grant agreement, then we will have a time frame in which the money will be spent and the work would be done. Does that make sense?
Marginally.
I'd be happy to talk with you offline, but I think because all of the items that you mentioned were pretty well specific to the project itself, I think it'd be more beneficial for you to speak with them directly.
Well, I understand that the half of my neighborhood is gone now, as good as. So, yeah, there's not a lot I can say about any of that. Just hoping that it's directed a little bit better, not just a hands-off, but maybe the county or, let's say, the whoever handles now parks, or, you know, when does the beautification take place? Because we know the destruction is coming. When do we make it a human site again?
Ms. Mayor?
One final comment. I would just say, again, those are privately owned properties, though, so they're only going to have to be under the restrictions that we would hold other properties accountable to. So if it's just a big grassy area, then they're going to have to, not make sure that it's mowed appropriately. But outside of that, we don't have any landscaping requirements for undeveloped property.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mr. Tharp? Hearing none, thank you. Our last speaker tonight is Sarah Foltz. She would like to also speak about the demolition of the East Hardin Street homes.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Foltz. I also live on East Hardin Street, and thank you. I could not have said that better myself. I don't have any questions, but I come here just as a concerned citizen. My partner and I, we live, we work, we play all in downtown Findlay. When we purchased our house on the corner of East Hardin Street just 2.5 years ago, we knew that we were right on the edge of commercial and residential. And we knew that being so involved in downtown Findlay, that came with charm, and we knew just looking right down East Hardin Street, it was beautiful. There were kids playing outside. Now half of our street is ghost town. And at the time when we bought our house, if we knew that this was going to happen, we may not have made the same decision that we did. Coming to find out now with some of my connections in our community, I only know some of the things that I know because they were willing to reach out to me and tell me. I look up and I try to research, and I can't find any of these plans to this extent, to the demolition of these properties, to how rapidly they became vacant. And to be completely honest with you, the property owners now, from what I understand, the Y owns all of them. They are not being well kept, and I understand that the goal is to demolish them. But even prior to that, some of these houses being over 100 years old and some of them pretty close to being 100 years old, absolutely did not have to go vacant and could have completely remained affordable housing in our community. The fact that City Council has approved hundreds of thousands of dollars to help demolish these and effectively bring gentrification right across some of these historic homes is really, really concerning to me. Living in downtown Findlay is not going to be the same after this, looking down the street and not seeing kids playing outside, not knowing if it's just going to be a slab of pavement, if it's just going to be gravel. It's going to be incredibly different. The quality of life completely changes, and I'm very concerned about my property value. I'm very concerned that a lot of these things I could have known, but at this point, I just think that it's important to share in hopes that this can prevent someone from feeling the same way in the future, in addition to preserving some historic homes and affordable housing in our community.
Questions or comments for Ms. Foltz? Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our oral communications. We do have some written communications.
An email from Pat J. regarding proposed park.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
An email from Pam Basinger regarding proposed park.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
And capital improvement plan investments project information summary for the police department body worn camera program via ordinance 2023-24.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Reports from municipal officers and departments.
Letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Grant Administrator Essinger regarding Community Development Block Grant Fair Housing and Administration Update of Agreements.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
So Robert Mayor, so we found this error now, and we're in essence going back and resolving the original resolution to make sure it is legal or it's up to standard. Is that the way I read what we're discussing with this letter and the ordinance that was created?
Mayor Mirren?
Correct. Regional planning, I'm not sure exactly if it was in communication with the auditor's office or just from their outside entity, recognized that though the agreement was in place for the partnership and the administration, there wasn't the proper language for the payment to regional planning for the administration has been done in the past. And so we just need to update the language to allow those payments.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Stashek?
Yeah, it was our office that identified this, and we're hoping, like, we found some things with RLF in the not too distant past, and we're hoping that regional planning is able to put a few things into their processes that'll catch these things for themselves, so that we don't get this far down the road in the future.
Mr. Russell?
Then Jim, is this something to take care of tonight, or how would you like to, from a reading standpoint, what's best for?
You have flexibility because we're asking for a retroactive component to it, but in essence, if it's your intention to continue to do business, which we all know that it is, the sooner the better, so you're compliant and they have the rights to do what they're asking to do, because currently they don't have that right.
Other questions or comments? Report to be filed, or letter to be filed, I'm sorry.
Traffic Commission minutes of February 21st, 2023.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding American Rescue Plan Act demolition program.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Just for clarification, and I actually know the answer, 305, 307 is West Lincoln Street, not just simply Lincoln Street. So would like someplace that to reflect the specific properties.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department activities report for February 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City income tax monthly collections report for February 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
A letter from Assistant City Engineer Roush regarding Strict Center GMP4.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser?
On this one, so this is going out to bid to start the building. It looked like the building had already started.
Please identify yourself and answer the question.
Yeah, I'm Lee Roush, Assistant City Engineer, and this is for the our fourth construction package. So what you see right now under construction has been approved previously by council for the initial project, funding, and then 2 amendments. This is Amendment 3, or guarantee maximum price for the final package for construction.
So were they going out to bid for this final package?
No, they've already received all their bids for it. It's a design build project, so they solicit bids from numerous subcontractors, give us the best price. We negotiate or review those prices with them and have agreed to the prices that they have submitted. And we've also done some additional value engineering to save about $167,000 on the project based on some of those prices and some ideas that we get from the subs. Being the design build component, we can work with subs and work with the general contractor rather than just bidding it out and get what we get on the design plan. So it's been a good process to identify some savings for the city.
Very good.
Mr. Hellman?
Just for my own edification, is this what has been referred to in the past as the burn building?
No, the burn building is a separate component. The strict building is what you see under construction now. That will have a 2-story frame house built in it for training inside. That's why that building is so big. Just to the north of that will be the burn building component of the project, and that will be several shipping containers configured for firefighter training. They'll have some live burn activity in there where they smoke and heat and training, and that is covered under a CDBG grant for that portion of the project and includes some of our site work as well.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Thank you.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding first capital improvement appropriation of 2023.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Harrison Street Waterline, project number 35720200.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
I think this is probably more for Jim. We have to do legislation just to rename a fund?
I had an interesting conversation with the deputy auditor, and the idea was, for full transparency, you do not, this is not necessarily legislation per se as much as it is putting you on notice that it's going on. And that was, I believe, the conversation that you guys had. Let's be transparent, let's be open, so project money doesn't get appropriated for one thing and then all of a sudden be used to build another thing. So the idea was, let's make it clear so that there's no problems here.
Mr. Baumann?
Jeremy, is there a timeline on this particular project? Are you wanting to get moving with this, or?
So, so for this, oh, sorry.
Go
ahead. So for this, I don't need any vote or anything. This is just pretty much notifying you guys that we've kind of changed our focus. We've actually been working on it, and here in the next couple of weeks, we're hoping to get this sent out to bid, so that way we can get this done here fairly soon. So I don't need any vote tonight on that.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding ARPA Fund appropriation of 2023.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Community Development Block Grant Application Public Park Restroom Facilities.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Oh, sorry, Mr. Baumann.
Jeremy, my apologies. I was confused. This is the one that I was asking about originally. I was a step ahead. Is there any need to move this tonight?
Go ahead.
If we could move this tonight, that'd be great, because the applications are due at the end of March. This is where we work in conjunction with Hancock Regional Planning, since this is CDBG. But with the timeline on this, we were just notified that our pre-applications were accepted to submit for a full application. So if we could, that'd be great.
Ms. Frishy?
So my questions are, it's going to put in new restroom facilities at the 3 locations of Rawson, Swale, and Emery Adams. Is it that we could not do any CBDG? A lot of people have been talking about our other parks and bathrooms needing updates. None of those funds can go towards anything like that.
Go ahead.
No, because with CDBG, it has to do with a lower or moderate income. So there's certain areas where we can use it within the city. We tried to find every spot we could, but these are the ones that qualify through their standards or through their specs.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Human Resources Director Essex regarding 2022 City of Findlay Employee Survey results.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Mayor, do you want to, is there anything here in its entirety that you want to speak to, or like, I would, it's an open question, and then specifically, are there specific takeaways that the city is going to be working on to improve for 2023-24?
Mayor Mirren.
Thank you, Councilman Russell. So overall, the results were positive. We have seen a little bit of a decrease in a couple of areas. Overall, I'm really proud that the top items are that our people feel valued and respected, and that they work well as teams. Obviously, that's extremely important. I'm not really surprised by the bottom portion. That's been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, especially coming out of the pandemic. We previously had done quarterly communication meetings with all of the departments. During the pandemic, that became less frequent. We were doing emails. We weren't as in person. We're starting to get back out more regularly. A lot of the confusion that we're seeing right now, as you can see, those are related to the strategic plan, and our employees are just kind of confused of, well, we don't have that citywide strategic plan yet. How does that relate to some of the internal strategic plan goals that we had over time? So it's always that challenge of clear communication, getting that information out to them. So we will be doing, we're getting back those quarterly communication meetings. We've already been doing those a couple times over the last 6 months. But I think we're trying to figure out more creative ways to get information about some of those more strategic objectives. One of the outcomes that we did last year after that is, you might see in our departments when you walk in, they have like a 1-page summary sheet that's like our mission, vision, values, and some of the key objectives for that department. So we think that's been helpful, but really it's just continuing to follow up. There's no real items at this point other than reiterating to the department heads to make sure that they are also taking information back to their employees throughout the year. When we meet on a weekly basis, and then we're getting together with the departments on a quarterly basis. So we might start doing handouts maybe every other month or something to the department heads to say, when you have your monthly department meeting, make sure you're hitting these points.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Planning Commission minutes of February 9th, 2023, as well as the staff report of March 9th, 2023.
Questions or comments? Minutes and report to be filed. We have no committee reports this evening. We'll move on to legislation, and we will start with resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 7, 2023, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Russell?
Move for adoption of resolution 007-2023.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Ms. Frishy?
Just looking for explanation on the two bills, the one for the law director for $29,489 and water pollution control as well, if we can just get a little detail real
We
quick.
will start with Mr. Rasmussen.
This is a bill from outside counsel, so we have the money in our budget, but it's a timing issue.
What case is that for?
It's George Martin's.
I just wanted to see if you'd ever change your answer.
Does anybody want to speak to her question on the water department? Go ahead.
If you recall that we have those railroad right-of-ways that are going to start hitting this budget this year, so that's what that's for.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 8, 2023. A resolution stating what services the City of Findlay, Ohio will provide to the territory proposed to be annexed to the City of Findlay, Ohio, situated in Allen Township, County of Hancock, State of Ohio, and being a part of the northeast quarter of Section 36, Township 2 North, Range 10 East, a tract of land consisting of 64.941 acres of land, more or less.
Okay, next.
First reading for Resolution 9, 2023. A resolution stating what services the City of Findlay, Ohio will provide to the territory proposed to be annexed to the City of Findlay, Ohio, situated in Allen Township, County of Hancock, State of Ohio, and being a part of the southeast quarter of Section 25, Township 2 North, Range 10 East, a tract of land consisting of 73.077 acres of land, more or less.
Okay, we will now move on to ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-10, an ordinance accepting the final plat as shown on the Lakota Park roadway dedication plat and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2023-010.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
It didn't need to have a public hearing for that, for a plat? No?
Not
Okay.
for plats.
Not for plat. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
And Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-11, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2023-011.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-12, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann,
I make a motion for passage of ordinance number 2023-012.
second, Mr. Greeno, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-14, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a contract with Innovative Software Services Incorporated for income tax software to be utilized by the city of Findlay Income Tax, project number 319-250-000, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough,
I'd move for adoption of ordinance 2023-014.
second, Mr. Hellman, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer, or Hellman, excuse me.
Aye.
Sorry.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-16, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Gemstick LLC for the implementation of an inventory management software system, purchase of required devices, 3-year subscription, and annual data and infrastructure to be utilized by the city of Findlay, Ohio Airport, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann,
I make a motion for passage of ordinance number 2023-016.
second, Mr. Wobser, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2023-19, an ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Findlay codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell,
Generally, this is an annual thing that we do, and we get these updates to our code, and usually it's a pretty seamless process, but this year that does not seem to be the case. It seems like Drain and Company, whoever they're called now, has included an ordinance in our package that we wouldn't normally, or that we didn't pass, and so it was included in air. And I'm not 100% sure that we're ready to handle this. I think I'd rather have 2 more weeks so that we can ensure that what we're passing is an accurate reflection of what we did last year. And so I would make a motion to table this.
second, Mr. Wobser, all those in favor of tabling the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Nay.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Nay.
And Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
3 nay.
That tables it, right? 7-3.
Becomes
And the ordinance is tabled.
second reading for ordinance 2023-20, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a contract with the Ohio Attorney General's office to provide municipal income tax collection services to the city of Findlay Income Tax Department and declared an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2023-22, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to individually enter into any participation agreement or agreements in relation to the National Opioid Settlement Program that have been agreed to by the state of Ohio, declaring a real and present emergency.
Mr. Russell,
I kind of recall from last week or last meeting that this was something that we gave it the one reading, but we were looking at doing tonight. This is, I mean, Mayor, this is pretty standard for us to continue on with our previous acceptance of this, of the opioid processes, correct?
President.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
If I may. Yes, correct. This is standard process. So with the city of Findlay entered into the contract with the state of Ohio for the national opioid settlement. What that means is that these lawyers are all working together, and instead of the city of Findlay having to go out and try to fight it on our own, they're all working together. Then we have agreed to a standard distribution of those funds based off of a very complex calculation related to opioid overdose deaths in a period of time, as well as population and all these things. So we had previously had authorization to enter into a contract with kind of the big three. They are now working to use that same model for additional settlement agreements. And so what we need is just language from you all stating that rather than coming back for each individual settlement and getting legislation naming that specific entity, the deputy auditor recommended that we enter into a contract or give authorization that any contracts that the state of Ohio, as part of the settlement agreement, negotiates, that we would accept that settlement.
Mr. Stashak.
And I think to your question, there's no specific need to pass this tonight that I'm aware of. This goes to settlements that are being negotiated with Teva, I think it is, Allergen, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart. Those are the ones that are pending, and there'll be more, but I don't think there's a rush to pass it tonight.
Ms. Frischi.
Why do we use the word individually, allowing you as the mayor to individually enter into? Why isn't it the city entering into it?
Mayor.
That was just, okay, so I'll answer Jim's question real quick. My understanding, Jim, and maybe I'm remembering dates right now, I thought we had to have it back to them by the end of March.
That could, you may be aware of a date that I'm not in
Yeah,
that case. So,
the date was
it's
March
possible.
31st that we needed to get that back to them. So that's why I had requested, made sure it got on the last agenda. So I would appreciate if it could be expedited this evening. Regarding individually, that's just the language that I think, as a representative of the mayor, that was kind of standard language we've used in past. But it's just me and signing it on behalf of the city.
Mr. Russell.
Make a motion that council's rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-022 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr.
Or,
Baumann.
excuse me, third reading.
I'm sorry. Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frischi?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2023-22.
Mr. Welpser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frischi?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Lost my place. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2023-23, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2024 as amended, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into an agreement for the purchase of body-worn cameras through the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services Grant Program, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
This I did speak with Rob earlier and confirming conversations from our last meeting. This needs to get passed tonight so that we can enter into the program. And while I have questions personally about kind of the details of the body-worn camera program, I'm not sure that this is the avenue or this is the venue tonight to discuss them. What is important, though, is that, we've heard from the citizens that body-worn cameras are important, and I think that it is, we will be going we will be implementing a program of some sort of body-worn cameras for our officers, one way or the other. This is simply a funding mechanism to help us defray the large capital expense for the first year of implementation. So either way, regardless of the questions and discussions in the future, that I think is appropriate for us to have with full council and Rob and Chief Ring and the mayor, this legislation should happen tonight because we want to accept the assistance for the capital purchase. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion, or I do motion that ordinance 2023-024 be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of suspending the rules and giving this ordinance its third reading, say aye. After your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Rules of council been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2023-24 as amended.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Any further discussion or questions? Ms. Frishy.
Grant brought up the point that he had some questions. My question would just be on this grant, are we limited to only certain products or certain brands or anything? With that grant, is there any limitations on it, or do we truly have a full discussion that we can still make choices?
Chief?
Robert Ring, I'm the chief. We are not limited to any specific brand. They will reimburse whatever we end up purchasing as long as it's a body-worn camera.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Chief. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-26. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into an agreement with the Hancock Regional Planning Commission, hereinafter referred to as HRPC, for the facilitation and preparation of the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, program years 2022 and 23, retroactive to January 1st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Move the council's statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-026 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules and the ordinance be given its second and third reading, say aye. After your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
The suspension of the rules has been approved, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-26. Ordinance 2023-26.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-27, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for demolition services related to the American Rescue Plan Act demolition program and declaring an emergency. I think.
I'm sorry, Ms. Warnicki.
Is this an appropriate time to have a discussion on that?
Sure.
I saw the list in the paper this morning of all these properties, today or yesterday, sometime I saw that. And I want to thank you guys for coming and discussing that. I guess the other guy's gone already. I know when we discussed this in committee that we were going to allow ARPA fund monies to be spent on demolition. It was for as it's stated here, properties that were blighted, had safety concerns, or were vacant. It does say that here. I guess I thought, and it was talked about at the time, people that maybe couldn't afford it but had a crappy looking garage, for lack of a more appropriate term, or something that they couldn't pay to take down and to remove, that makes the city look better. And I know it was also mentioned at that time that it could be used for businesses also. It sounds like it's being used primarily for the YMCA here. So, which I was unaware of. But I know when I read these, I thought, based on my understanding, that we were trying to help people who couldn't afford to take down things that were making the city look bad. I thought, golly, you know, why are these all like bing, 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 bing right next to one another? I understand from what you guys said, or I think I understand, that they are vacant. I assume maybe because the YMCA bought these homes and is now just asking to have them torn down. It would just be my opinion, just my personal opinion, that that doesn't satisfy the thought that we had as to why we were using ARPA funds to pay for this. And I guess I was just curious what anyone else's opinion was on that, and if we, just because these have been given and they qualify as vacant, if we have to go ahead and use city money for that.
Mayor Murin.
So certainly it's the prerogative of council to not move forward if they so choose. I would say that within, you know, we allocated the $400,000. We did state in there that priority would be given to citizens, then nonprofits, then businesses. We kind of set out a rubric that individuals that were lower income would be given priority. So I do feel that we gave that rubric. You know, if the council was concerned about it not meeting the initial expectations, what I would probably recommend is, and I was going to recommend that we kind of do a second round anyways later, and open it back up. You know, I felt like we advertised it, we put it out there, you know, newspaper, website, social media, all of that. But I would like to see it used more for those other properties. With that said, I do feel that the, you know, YMCA met the restrictions of it. I know that they had reached out to the state when the state had made the demolition funds available, and the state funds had been spent already, so that they weren't able to take advantage of that. I think that these properties, though some of them are in better condition, I know the one, there was concerns brought up by the neighborhood and the historical museum, and so that has been removed from the list. About, you know, they are looking at alternatives to maintain that property. I think that they meet the restrictions. I think that the project that they are planning does have a good opportunity to kind of invest in that neighborhood. But, you know, it's ultimately up to council if they feel that it's appropriate to move forward with this. And I would state as well that our team did review each of the properties. Some are in better condition than others. I would say that overall, each of them does have some form of significant issue with them that would need to be addressed to be able to really make them a livable space. So I would say that they did meet the general parameters of the program.
Ms. Warnicki.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking based on what they're saying these are going to be used for, I don't think it's going to stop the process. I mean, they're probably going to get demolished one way or the other for them to continue. I guess I feel uncomfortable that, just in my opinion, it doesn't satisfy. I know based on, you know, you could say it does, but it doesn't satisfy what I thought we were going to be using it for. And I guess I wanted to say that. So I have.
Slough.
When I was board president of the YMCA back, I want to say it was 2005 with Russ Gardner, we had the same plans to do what we're talking about doing today. And in my humble opinion, I think it's reached a time and a point in time now that we move forward with this, because it would be a great addition to the downtown, number one, it would be a great recruiting tool for businesses that are thinking about coming into our community. So I think the time has come to move forward with it.
Mr. Hellman.
I concur with that to a certain extent, but I'd like to put a caveat in there that if the properties are demolished and the land is there a way that we can make certain that it is filled in nicely, landscaped properly, and with grass or fencing or shrubbery or some kind of landscaping, so that it is not an eyesore on the neighborhood or becomes dangerous for kids to play there?
Mayor.
So I guess I would like to, so first of all, the YMCA has a child development center and everything right there. I have full faith in them not to make it a hazardous environment. I guess I want to separate the conversation here. I think the concept of the YMCA project, I agree, great project, beneficial. That's separate of this program and the discussion. And I think that that's very important, because otherwise I think we would be inappropriately treating the YMCA different than any other applicant just because we're aware that they are using it for a future use, which I think ultimately was part of the goal, right? We want to clean up properties so that they can be better utilized or cleaned up in our community. Would I rather see it be, 20 buildings that are in rough shape, in sporadically through neighborhoods cleaned up? Yes, I would love that, and I think we should open it up again and see if we get more. But do I think that it also serves the purpose and intent overall of the program when we established it? And did they meet the standards that we put in place to get funded? I think it would be a totally different conversation if we had $600,000 worth of applicants and we were prioritizing them over other projects. But I think that overall they met the standards and the purpose.
Mr. Greeno.
The 404 East Lincoln, I know that was withdrawn because of historical content. Do we know if any of these other homes have any historical significance? Yes. That's the word I was looking for.
Well, yes. So because these funds are ultimately federal funds, Section 106 reviews have been completed by Hancock Regional Planning Commission. There were some, I don't know the proper term, so I hope this is, there were some very unconcerning. So we had the state commission and all those entities weigh in. Some of them did also have, historical ties, as any property that's been around for a long time probably does. But 404 was the one that was most significant, and was, their discussion between the YMCA and the Historical Museum is now underway. And so they have withdrawn that so that that doesn't slow up our process, and they can have further discussions and determine what would be appropriate.
So the 106 reviews were done locally, or were they done?
Correct.
Were they
So
done by the state too also? Or?
So the 106 reviews, I'm not intimately aware of the process, but Lizzie Essinger with Hancock Regional Planning Commission is the one that led that completion, and as part of that, they go through the local historical society has an opportunity to weigh in, as well as the state historical commission, I believe is what it is called. So those entities have all weighed in.
Thank you.
Ms. Frishy.
So I remember that we talked about the state funds that Y did not get, and that was part of the reason for this this opportunity to do some demolishing. I don't think we considered as council in general, or it never even entered, about a 6-block section or something where the citizens have a concern, some valid concerns that I never thought about with drainage and other things, and those are, I'm assuming, zoned residential and would have to rezone once the Y brings a plan forward, correct? We're going to have to rezone that. And do we know, is the drainage there, is the runoff there to address those valid concerns of residents, since it's such a larger?
Mayor.
Yeah, they would all have to be addressed during City Planning Commission. If they can't meet the standards, they would have to modify their plan. They're
So
gonna
it
be
could end up, but what I'm saying is, what could happen is our opportunity for doing a good expansion at the Y could end up becoming something that it ends up being a green space that could have been additional housing, affordable housing that you mentioned. Is there anything for us to consider or think to, I guess, address the citizens' concerns before we final approve this? Because it's kind of, we want to do something with, we want to help the Y out and any other of the 5 submissions. But I think they had some valid concerns from the citizens that came. Can we address those somehow?
Mr. Baumann?
I guess back to Denny's original question, real fast. Once those properties do come down, they would be come under the purview of our zoning department and those regulations, so they would be upkept that way. We would keep an eye on those.
Mayor?
That is correct. Yeah, so they would have to go to City Planning Commission. They would have to work through that. You know, this is not a needs to be passed tonight type of item. What I really think needs to occur is that the neighborhood needs to reach out to the YMCA. This is between property owners, and I think then if the YMCA is willing to share more publicly with council their plans, I think that that would be appropriate. To provide council more information, but I guess I just want to be very cautious that we're not treating people differently just because they have a potential project versus if this was other property. So let's be careful on that, but I will be happy to reach out to the YMCA and see if they would be interested in sharing more information with you all. And if we need to reevaluate this, that's fine. This is not something that needs passed tonight.
Mr. Neymar?
The ARPA letter from the mayor at the bottom, it does say, for some reason, if the cost would increase for the individual, we believe it is appropriate for the city to cover that difference.
Mayor?
That's like, I mean, they're only spending 15%. Why should the city? This is just absurd. I think.
Mayor?
So the reason that was discussed and recommended is because when we were discussing with the deputy auditor and Lizzie Essinger with regional planning, so they went out and we said, you need to get a couple bids as part of this so that we have a ballpark figure of what it's going to cost. And they could have all come back with different people doing their work, different bid amounts, no big deal. Then they could have entered into the contract, or we could have entered into the contract and they could have then just paid their 15%. What happened is quite a few of the bids came back from the same vendors because it was over our bid requirements. We now need to bid it out. Now, I expect that will not have a significant modification in price, but one of the other things that was brought up was, as part of that, as stewards and using, again, this money, we need to make sure that we do appropriate asbestos abatement of the demolition on those properties. And because we didn't specify when they went out and got their bid, hey, you need to make sure you do that as well, we didn't think that it would be appropriate to go back to them, because we did have some additional funding available, to say, hey, if we have to pay another couple $100 to get the asbestos check done, that you now need to cover that additional funding. So that would only be for the citizens that we're going to pay the 15%.
Ms. Fisher?
So you just said you didn't think it'd be fair for them to pay that. The word asbestos could be no big deal, but it could be a pricey thing as well. And you just got done telling us that you think you want to do another round since we have extra dollars. So why should we cut into that? What would be a valid reason for that?
Mayor?
Yeah, so I don't expect it to be super significant because we're demolishing it. So really the only difference is if we're demolishing it, we just have to pay an additional fee to do it as a hazardous waste. So really the demolition process is not going to be significantly different.
Next.
First reading for ordinance 2023-28. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 4, GMP4, with Klaus Construction Corporation for site utility, concrete, and final build-out, including finishes, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing of the Strict Center project, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-29. An ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for various projects, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
So, question to Jeremy, standard capital improvement appropriation, we do this every year. here it is in March. Usually I thought we had wanted to try to get out earlier than March to, with this, but with our pricing environment, is there an advantage to us to be able to get out to bid early and get, especially on the road stuff, get these folks lined up and ready to go? And
Mr. Kelp.
So no, it would not need to be done tonight. The street resurfacing, we actually had that out to bid. They are wanting to start as soon as they can, but it's not needing to be passed tonight. It can go additional readings. But most of these projects that I had on here are already bid out for early pricing, or they have price increases that are potential tied with them. So it is not needing done tonight. I will take it, but it is not needing done tonight.
Mr. Russell.
so sorry, Mad Cow, but I don't recall. Did we already pass legislation to start the street program for this year?
Mr. Cal.
Or at least get it
Yeah,
underway?
yeah. So I think it was in December, maybe the first ordinance. I appropriated like $1,000 to send out for bid. So the amount that's in there right now, that will be for a contractor to come in for the concrete work. So I have approval to go out to bid and do the advertisement. Correct. Yes.
So we have the bids in hand.
We have the bids in hand, and they're itching to start.
Mr. Wilson.
We still haven't approved the capital plan yet, so that's going to be done here soon. Go ahead.
Mayor.
Yeah, so Councilman Wobser, if you recall, last week or 2 weeks ago, Councilman Wobser, Auditor Stashak, myself, Jeremy, and Rob sat down and went through the capital plan. As you guys recall, we're working through a lot of pieces. We're putting together a massive puzzle. We are very close to presenting that. We got some good feedback from the auditor and Councilman Wobser on some things that they wanted to see. So we are taking a second look at that. However, with that, some of these standard items that we do annually, like preventative maintenance, street resurfacing, we said, were they comfortable with us moving forward with requesting those so that we're kind of ahead of the ball game, and then those will be noted in the overall capital plan as such.
Mr. Russell.
So in our street bids, do we have a set of streets plus a set of additionals that they can get to if they're having if they're rolling? Because I'm always in favor of having, especially on the street projects, having them ready to go as soon as they can, because I know that in the long run that gets our road contractors wanting to work with the city of Findlay. I want to encourage their low bidding and early participation or early working, and I'm ready to go tonight on this. But it sounds like I'm more eager and energetic than you are, and I don't know that that's ever happened before.
Mr. Calb.
So, I guess, yes, that is to our advantage. I guess answer multiple questions. That is to our advantage. As soon as the apparent low bidder for this contract, he was notified that he's apparent low. He called me that day and said, "How soon can I start?" That's one of the advantage with you guys approving this money earlier and stuff like that. I can get them started. He has 2 crews ready to go. He wants to come in to town and do it as quick as possible. So with the bidding, we have a base set of streets, and then we have alternates that we do. If we have funding left over, if some streets came in a lot cheaper than the final cost of it with quantities comes in cheaper, then we can add in additional streets as needed. Why I don't really need it necessarily tonight is because of weather. Still not sure whether if it's going to break. It's trending good, but if he said if we can get end of March, early April, he still has us in the books for that.
Jeremy, if I am shoveling my driveway at the end of this week, you and I are going to have words.
Ms. Frischie.
And I think we need to note that we have on that ordinance, it's declared an emergency. So as soon as we pass it, whether it's the 2nd or the 3rd, as soon as the mayor signs it, we're good to go, and they can get out there as soon as the snow's gone. So I think we can move forward.
Okay, next.
Did you say?
First reading for ordinance 2023-30. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts so that American Rescue Plan Act funds may be utilized to purchase various items for designated various projects listed below, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, can I just make one quick comment? So again, we're gonna let this roll out for a little bit. I did just want to note again that these were items that, with the ARPA money, we were trying to spend them on projects that we knew we were already going to have to do so that it would one, be easier on the reporting side, and two, would help kind of free up capital dollars to be more flexible. So that's why you see these specific items, again, items that we were going to typically spend capital dollars on anyways. So that's why we felt comfortable putting them forward to council prior to having a full capital discussion.
First reading for ordinance 2023-31. An ordinance authorizing mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to execute the necessary grant applications and/or agreements to receive grant funds from the Community Development Block Grant Program for reconstruction or renovations of public park restroom facilities and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
Council commonly waives rules when we are applying for grant money, and this is no different. Therefore, I move that ordinance 2023-031 be given its second and third movement.
Second, Mr.
Motion.
Baumann.
Reading.
All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-31.
31. Do it twice.
Oh, yeah, ordinance 2023-31.
Got it. Mr. Baumann?
I make a motion for passage of ordinance number 2023-031.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion? Ms. Frishy?
Remind me, Jeremy, it's 100% paid for all three of those new restrooms, no cost out of our budget, right?
Mr. Kelp?
Yeah, that is correct. So we will be handling the design and engineering in-house for that, but the construction cost for that is 100% through the CDBG.
Hearing no other questions or comments, all those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Old business. Ms. Frishy?
We tabled ordinance 19. I didn't know that there was a lot of discussion going on with the codified ordinances. Is this something, since Grant is learning a lot more about it than I guess what I'm aware of, should we be having this in a committee discussion if there's some kind of debate on something that I'm not aware of?
Mr. Russell?
This is a common process where Drain, our company who maintains our codified ordinances, they bring our ordinances in sync with changes that were made to Ohio Revised Code in the previous year, and they also bring the ordinances that we passed into our published code. It's usually some of the boringest reading I do in a year, and I've never seen a problem with it. But it's this year we tabled an ordinance that they included. So what they have presented us and what we would be voting on if we would untable and vote is not a correct representation of what this council passed. And to give Denise and myself and President Harrington and the law director a chance to just ensure that what we have from Drain is a correct reflection of that. Give us 2 weeks, and quite honestly, I didn't catch it. Matt Cordonier saw it and brought it up to Denise's attention. So it is about as dull and mundane as it gets on council, but we got to do it right, and we need 2 more weeks.
Any other old business, new business? Mr. Russell?
Thursday, how about Thursday, March 9th at noon? We will have a planning and zoning committee right here in this room. It will be live streamed. We will continue to talk about our proposed zoning code changes. Hopefully that will be the second or the last one or the second to last one before we can move that process on.
What time?
At noon.
Other new business, Mr. Russell?
Not really new business, but I would be remiss and fined heavily tomorrow at the Kiwanis meeting if I did not make this shameless plug that Saturday is Pancake Day at Findlay High School cafeteria from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. All you can eat Kiwanis Pancake Day. I believe it was described as the best pancake breakfast in town, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. All you can eat, and thank you for allowing me this shameless plug.
My grandchildren will argue the fact that PPP, Papa's Perfect Pancakes, are the best ever. So, Mr. Webster.
Following our discussion on ordinance 29, I'd like to call an appropriations committee meeting for a week from today, Tuesday, March 14th, 4 p.m., the mayor's conference room on 3rd floor. At that point, the administration will have all of the stuff put together that we discussed at our meeting, I guess it was last week, and we'll be ready to have our appropriations discussion and get that approved through committee.
Other new business? Mayor?
Just one item that I have not mentioned already. I think it appropriate to recognize Councilman Slough's award, the Jefferson Award for his public service. He certainly has been an influential pillar in our community and serving on this body for many years. And so just wanted to give him a quick shout out both on that and for his service to our community. I am certainly grateful, but I'm glad to recognize you for being recognized by the United Way. You're so welcome.
Other new business, Mr. Wobson?
Just following up, I'd invite all of council to attend the appropriations committee. Normally, we've done this as a committee of the whole in the past, but we'll just still call it appropriations, but Mayor has another comment.
If we could actually do it down here, since we don't have the upstairs conference room done yet, I'd like to be able to live stream.
Very good. We'll move that to council chambers. Tuesday, March 14th, appropriations, but everybody is invited to see the Capitol, and that's 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for those that may not be in.
Other new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So move Mr. Niemeyer, second Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of adjournment say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned.